Good evening, and welcome back to The Curious Case. I'm Davis. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And how has your day been so far? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy these nightly mysteries. Because tonight, Miss Marple arrives in a quiet little village, a peaceful place, a friendly place. But something feels out of place. A small detail. A soft whisper. A sign that trouble is already waiting in the shadows. The first chill of late autumn settled over Hollow Fern Village. Miss Marple stepped off the small platform, her bag in hand, her calm eyes taking in the quiet lanes. A porter nodded to her, a simple greeting, nothing more. Morning noise was soft here, footsteps, a distant cart, little else. Miss Marple paused a moment. Her mind noted the small things, the clean platform edge, the still air, the way the station master kept glancing toward the lane. People reveal much in small actions. She had learned that long ago. A small motor car rolled forward. Agatha Rowell stepped out. Warm smile, quick steps, slight tension in the shoulders. Miss Marple saw it at once. "My dear Miss Marple, you made it," Agatha said. She squeezed Miss Marple's hands. A kind gesture, but her fingers trembled a little. "I am very glad to be here," Miss Marple replied. "And you look well, though perhaps a bit tired." Agatha forced a small laugh. "Oh, just village matters, nothing serious." Miss Marple did not press. People speak more when they are not pushed. She simply nodded and followed her to the car. The drive began slowly. Narrow lanes, low stone walls, a light mist over the fields. Simple country life. Agatha kept glancing at the rear-view mirror. Not for traffic. Miss Marple noticed that too. The older woman turned her gaze away, letting Agatha speak when ready. "Hollow Fern Village is quiet these days," Agatha said. "Quieter than usual, I suppose." Miss Marple tilted her head. "And yet you sound unsure." "Well, you know villages," Agatha said. Her hands tightened lightly on the wheel. People talk, people notice, people worry. Miss Marple waited. Silence often reveals more than questions. At last, Agatha sighed. "There's been tension around Hollow Fern Farm." Miss Marple looked out the window. She saw the farm in the distance, a long fence, sloped fields. Nothing unusual at first glance. But she trusted Agatha's tone. Tone often matters more than words. "Anything I should know?" Miss Marple asked softly. Agatha hesitated, then shook her head. "It's nothing, just odd chatter." Miss Marple gave a small smile. Odd chatter is rarely nothing in a village. Agatha's answer was a short breath, half a laugh, half a sigh. "Yes, you're right, but I'll explain later, when we're settled." They continued along the winding lane. A dog barked somewhere behind a hedge. A bird rose from a fence post. Ordinary sounds. But Hollow Fern Village felt strained beneath them. Something hidden, something unspoken. Miss Marple could sense it already. They reached Hollow Fern Farm Cottage, a neat home, clean path, warm curtains in the windows. But Agatha paused before opening the door. Just a moment. Just long enough for Miss Marple to notice. "Is everything quite all right, my dear?" Miss Marple asked. Agatha looked at her, a faint worry in her eyes. "Most things are," she said. "Though, well, something happened last week." Miss Marple stood very still. "Something?" Agatha nodded. "Yes, and it started, right out there, near the meadow." She pointed toward the fields. And Miss Marple knew the real story had just begun. The kitchen at Hollow Fern Farm Cottage was warm. Agatha poured tea. 2 cups, small steam, a quiet room. But her hands were not steady. Miss Marple noticed at once. People reveal more in stillness than in speech. She waited, calm, patient. Agatha sat down. She tried to smile, but the smile did not hold. Her eyes moved toward the window. Then away, then back again. Miss Marple followed her gaze. The fields outside lay still, Hedges, fences, grass, nothing unusual on the surface. Agatha leaned forward, lowered her voice. The tone changed before the words did. Miss Marple heard the shift, a soft tremor beneath the calm. "The village hasn't been normal," she said. Simple sentence, but full of pressure, as if holding much more behind it. Miss Marple folded her hands. "Not normal. How?" Agatha took a breath. One moment everything feels ordinary, then the next. The mood changes. People keep whispering. People look over their shoulders. People lower their voices when I walk by. Miss Marple nodded once. A tiny movement, encouraging, not pushing. Letting Agatha continue. "It started about 2 weeks ago," Agatha said. "A few villagers mentioned odd sounds at night." Miss Marple tilted her head. "What sort of sounds?" Agatha hesitated. Footsteps, voices, movements across the meadow path. "Human?" Miss Marple asked. "I think so, but no one has seen anything clearly, just shapes, just shadows." Miss Marple kept her tone light. "And all of this centers on Blackthorn Meadow?" Agatha swallowed. "Yes, always Blackthorn Meadow." There was a small silence, the kind that invites truth. Miss Marple did not break it. She simply waited. Agatha finally continued. "I didn't want to worry you. You've come here for rest, not trouble." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled gently. "My dear Agatha, I long ago accepted that trouble rarely waits for permission." That earned a real smile from Agatha. Brief, but real. Still, the worry returned. Heavier now. "There's something odd about that meadow," Agatha said again, her voice softer, almost a whisper now, as if the meadow itself might hear. "Odd in what way?" Miss Marple asked. Agatha looked at her hands, at the table, at the window again. She seemed unable to hold her focus, a sure sign of deeper fear. "Animals avoid it," she said. "Farm dogs won't go near the far fence. Even the horses stop and refuse to cross the gate. And the children, they keep saying someone is out there at dusk, just standing, watching." Miss Marple absorbed each detail, quietly, logically, sorting them the way one sorts loose threads. Agatha lowered her voice even further. "Some villagers think it's only nerves, or the season, or the mist." Miss Marple shook her head gently. "Nerves do not create patterns." Agatha nodded slowly. "I suppose you're right." Another pause, another small tremor in the air. Finally, Agatha leaned closer, as if sharing something she had held back too long. "There's more," she whispered. "Something I haven't told you yet." Miss Marple looked up, calm, ready. Agatha's voice dropped to a thin breath. "It's about what I saw in Blackthorn Meadow, the night before you arrived." She stopped, eyes fixed on the window. Something had moved outside, or she thought it had, and Miss Marple knew this was only the beginning. Agatha set her cup down, a quiet sound, barely anything, but her fingers stayed on the rim, as if she needed something steady to hold. Miss Marple noticed, small gestures rarely lie. She waited, patient, calm. Agatha drew a breath. There was something she had been avoiding. It sat in the air, right between them, unspoken, heavy. "Miss Marple," she began, then stopped. Her eyes moved to the window again, then back, then down. "Yes, my dear?" Miss Marple asked, her tone warm, gentle, but clear, an invitation to speak. Agatha tried again. "I should tell you something I found last week." Miss Marple nodded. "Go on." Agatha's hand reached slowly toward a side drawer. She hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside lay a folded cloth, worn, dirty, striped. She lifted it carefully, like it carried weight, not physical weight, a different sort. "I found this," she said, "a week ago." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. No rush, just a soft, steady interest. "Where exactly?" Agatha swallowed. "At the edge of Blackthorn Meadow, caught on a thorn, just hanging there." Miss Marple studied the cloth. blue and white stripes, old fabric, used often, not washed recently, frayed at one side. Not yours, I assume? Miss Marple asked. No. Agatha shook her head quickly. And not anyone from the village. I checked, quietly. Nobody recognized it. Miss Marple touched the cloth gently. Her fingertips felt the coarse weave. It was not village-made. Not from local shops. Not from any of the nearby farms. Whoever dropped it, Miss Marple said softly, was not from here. Agatha nodded. That's what frightened me. Miss Marple looked up. Frightened? Agatha hesitated again. Yes, because it wasn't just lying on the ground. It wasn't trampled. It wasn't carried by wind. She held the cloth tighter. It was hooked on a thorn, like someone brushed past the hedge in a hurry. Too close, too fast, as if they were running. Miss Marple filed that detail away. Running, moving quickly, cutting too close to the hedge, careless enough to leave something behind. Anyone could have walked there, Miss Marple said. A simple line, logical, measured, not dismissive. Agatha met her eyes. Not at that hour. Miss Marple paused. What hour was that? Agatha lowered her voice again. Near dusk, cold, quiet, no reason for anyone to be there. Miss Marple considered this. The cloth, the time, the place, a stranger, a rush, a thorn high enough to catch cloth from someone tall. Agatha watched her anxiously. What do you think it means? Miss Marple didn't answer yet. She rarely spoke before she was ready. She touched the striped handkerchief again, feeling the dirt, the stiffness, the slight smell of smoke, barely there, but real. It means, she said slowly, that someone was somewhere they should not have been. Agatha shivered. Her hands closed around the cloth. What should I do with it? She asked. Miss Marple looked toward the window, toward the meadow, toward the quiet hedge where the cloth had once hung. You'll keep it safe for now, she said. Agatha nodded. She folded the cloth again, carefully, almost nervously. Miss Marple watched the movement, steady, silent, thoughtful, because something else had just struck her. A detail, small, but important, and it changed everything. The handkerchief wasn't the only thing someone left behind. The next morning came quietly. Cold air. Slow steps on the small lane. Miss Marple sat near the window with her knitting. Agatha prepared tea. Nothing unusual at first. Then the sound came. Fast steps, uneven, urgent. Agatha looked up. Miss Marple looked up too. They both heard the breathless panting before the knock even hit the door. Agatha rushed to open it. Eli Turner stood there, the young farm boy, wide-eyed, shaken, barely able to speak. He tried once, no words, just air. Eli, Agatha said gently. Take a breath. What happened? Eli shook his head, then tried again. There's a man. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, calm, prepared. She stepped closer. A man where? She asked softly. In the meadow. Blackthorn Meadow. Eli gasped. He's not moving. Agatha's hand flew to her mouth. Eli continued. I was going to the gate to check the troughs, and I saw him, lying there, right by the fence. Miss Marple placed a hand lightly on the boy's arm, her voice steady. Is anyone with him? Eli shook his head again. No one. He's alone. I didn't touch him. I just ran. Miss Marple nodded once. You did the right thing. Agatha grabbed her coat, her movements quick, nervous, a tremor in her fingers. Miss Marple took her own shawl, slow, measured, thinking already, connecting threads from the night before. They stepped outside. The lane was quiet. Eli led them down the path. Miss Marple walked behind him, observing. His boots were muddy, but the mud was fresh, wet, from the trough area, not from the meadow, not from where the body was. A useful detail. Small, but useful. They reached Blackthorn Meadow Gate. Eli stopped suddenly. He pointed. His hand shook. There, by the post. Miss Marple stepped closer. A man lay on his side, still, cold, face turned slightly toward the hedge. No struggle marks near him, no dragged soil, no scuff marks from boots. Odd. Very odd. Agatha gasped. Who is he? Do you know him? Eli shook his head. I've never seen him. Miss Marple knelt slowly, careful not to disturb anything. Her eyes moved across the ground, the fence, the hedge, the grass. Something stood out at once. A button, just a button, lying near the man's hand, too clean, too bright, not covered in dew, not pressed into the soil, not fallen naturally, placed. Miss Marple picked it up with a handkerchief, held it close, studied the back, the stitching grooves, the metal. Foreign, not local. Agatha whispered, What does it mean? Miss Marple did not answer. Not yet. Answers came after patterns. Patterns came after patience. She stood slowly. Her eyes swept the whole area once more. Fence post, gate chain, hedge line, grass crushed in one small patch. Someone else had been here. Recently. Quietly. With purpose. Miss Marple turned toward Agatha. Her expression calm, but her voice held weight. This was not an accident, she said. Agatha stared at her. Eli stepped back. Miss Marple looked again at the button, at the hedge, at the empty space beyond the gate. Because something else was missing. Something important. And someone knew she would notice. Constable Merrin arrived a few minutes later. Quick steps, tight jaw, not enough sleep. Miss Marple noticed the signs. He had been called out too often lately. He knelt beside the body, professional, careful, but hurried. Always a hint of hurry with him. All right, he muttered. Let's see what he has on him. Agatha stood back, hands clasped. Eli kept close to the fence, wide-eyed, silent. Miss Marple watched everything, not the man on the ground, but the people around him. Reactions mattered. Reactions always mattered. Constable Merrin checked the coat first. Front pockets, nothing. Side pockets, a few coins, a folded bit of string, a single bus ticket. No writing on the back. Then he reached into the inner pocket. He frowned. Pulled something out. A small leather notebook, worn, stiff, edges scuffed, not new. Well now, Merrin murmured. What have we here? He opened it. Pages rustled, then stopped. Abruptly, half the pages were missing. He blinked, flipped back and forth, looked confused. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward, not closer, just enough to see. Her eyes stayed steady. Fresh tear marks along the binding. Rough, uneven, done in haste. Miss Marple spoke softly. Those pages were removed recently. Merrin frowned. Possibly, though could be old damage. Miss Marple shook her head gently. No, the edges are clean, sharp, not worn at all. Merrin hesitated. He did not argue further, but he also did not agree. He returned to the notebook, turned it over. His brow creased again. Soil, he muttered. He brushed at it with a thumb. Miss Marple's tone was quiet. Don't do that. Merrin paused. What? Why? You will disturb the pattern, she said. Look at the color. Merrin looked. Red, deep red, not brown, not gray, not the soil of Blackthorn Meadow. That's odd, he said slowly. This isn't from here. Miss Marple nodded. No, it is from somewhere else, somewhere nearby, but not this field. Agatha stepped closer, her voice soft. What does that mean? Miss Marple did not answer her yet. Her mind was already moving. The handkerchief, the button, the stillness of the body, and now red soil on a notebook that should not be read. Merrin stood. We'll take this for examination. Might tell us where he came from or who he met. Miss Marple noted the phrasing. Might. Not will. Merrin rarely committed too early. A wise habit, but not always a useful one. She glanced again at the red soil, a small detail. But details linked stories together, and this one linked something important, something close. Eli tugged Agatha's sleeve. "Do you think the person who tore the pages is still around?" Agatha shivered. "I hope not." Miss Marple looked toward the far hedge. Her eyes narrowed just a little, because she had just seen something. Small, barely there, a faint mark near the gatepost, hidden in plain sight. And whatever it was, it did not belong there. Back at Agatha's cottage, the mood shifted. Not loudly, not sharply, just a quiet turn, a subtle change in the air. Agatha set the kettle on. Her hands still carried the morning's tension. Miss Marple watched her, steady, understanding more from silence than from speech. They sat, 2 cups, warm tea, soft clinks of china, a moment of stillness before the next wave. Then came the knock. Firm, familiar. Village timing was always precise. News traveled quickly here. Agatha opened the door. Mrs. Helda Briggs stepped inside, short stride, quick eyes, a woman who missed nothing. "I heard," she said at once. "No one's talking about anything else." She sat without waiting to be asked. Her coat half-buttoned, her voice low, her tone sharper than usual. "I heard arguments," she said, "near the fields, 2 nights ago." Miss Marple looked up gently. "Between whom?" Mrs. Briggs shrugged. "I couldn't see, but I know voices around here. One was local, one wasn't." Local, not local, a useful contrast. Miss Marple stored the detail. Mrs. Briggs leaned in. "I didn't like the sound of it. Old anger, real anger." Agatha exhaled quietly, not surprised, not shocked, just resigned. She had expected something like this. Another knock, softer this time, smaller hesitation between taps. Agatha opened the door again. Thomas Vere entered. Tall, awkward, always unsure where to put his hands. He nodded to Miss Marple, then sat. Half perched, half settled. "I saw someone," he said, "near the old barn, just before dawn." Miss Marple's focus sharpened, calmly, quietly. "A stranger?" she asked. "Yes, not from here. Stood by the barn door. Didn't move for a long time." "Doing what?" Miss Marple asked. "Nothing." Thomas swallowed. "Just watching the meadow." Agatha's breath caught. Mrs. Briggs stiffened. The old barn and Blackthorn meadow connected in more ways than people admitted. Too close to ignore, too exposed to be innocent. Miss Marple folded her hands. "And did he see you?" Thomas shook his head. "No. I stayed behind the hedge. Didn't feel right to go closer." Another detail, another puzzle piece. Then the third visitor arrived. Lydia Brooke. Soft steps, soft eyes, but a serious tone, always serious. She held a ledger under her arm, not unusual for her. She handled books for several village groups. "There's something you should know," Lydia said quietly. "It's about the farm council accounts." Miss Marple nodded once. "Continue." "They're overdue," Lydia said. "Badly. Pages missing. Figures changed. And no one is admitting who handled them last." Agatha swallowed. Mrs. Briggs muttered under her breath. Thomas shifted in his seat. Money. Tension. Old anger. Each clue small alone. But together. Something larger. Something forming shape. Lydia placed the ledger on the table. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. The weight of it said enough. Miss Marple looked at all 3 villagers. Calm. Thoughtful. Her mind weaving threads quietly. The arguments. The stranger. The accounts. The missing notebook pages. The red soil. The handkerchief. Too many pieces for coincidence. Too many signs for chance. The cottage fell silent. Everyone waited for Miss Marple to speak. She did not. Not yet. Patience was part of truth. But she did notice something at the window. A brief flash of movement. Small, quick, not wind. Someone was outside, listening, and Miss Marple knew the gossip had reached the wrong ears. The cottage grew quiet after the visitors left. Too quiet. Agatha cleared the cups. Her hands moved slowly, thoughtfully. Miss Marple watched her, then looked toward the window again. The earlier movement was gone now. Whoever had lingered outside had slipped away. A knock sounded once more, not loud, not rushed, just one careful tap. Agatha opened the door. Peter Lantern stood there, a steady man, moderate in speech, sensible in most things. But today, he looked uneasy. "May I speak with Miss Marple?" he asked softly. Agatha nodded and stepped aside. Peter removed his cap and held it in both hands, a sign of respect, or worry, or both. Miss Marple gestured for him to sit. He chose the edge of the chair. Not relaxed, not settled. His eyes moved to the ledger Lydia Brooke had left behind. "You saw that, did you?" Miss Marple asked gently. Peter nodded. "Yes, and it's why I came." Agatha sat beside Miss Marple, quiet, concern in her eyes. Peter took a long breath, then another. He looked at the floor, then finally spoke. "Something is wrong with the farm accounts," he said. Simple words, heavy meaning. Miss Marple gave a small nod. "How long have you suspected it?" "A while," Peter admitted. "Numbers don't lie. People do." Agatha winced at the truth of that. Peter continued. "The money doesn't match, not even close. Payments marked as received, but never actually arrived." Miss Marple folded her hands. "Has anyone else noticed?" Peter hesitated. "Yes, one other person." Miss Marple waited. No pressure, just quiet space. Peter filled it. "The man found in the meadow," he said. "He saw the accounts. He confronted someone about them." Agatha inhaled sharply. "You mean he knew?" Peter nodded again. "He knew something was off. Too off to ignore. He said he would take it higher, bring it to the council." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, but gently. "And what happened next?" Peter swallowed. He was warned to keep silent. Agatha's voice trembled. Warned by whom? Peter looked at his cap. He stalled, stared at the threads, turned the cap in his hands, clearly struggling with what to say. Finally, he spoke again. "He didn't tell me the name, but he was frightened. I'd never seen him frightened before." Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. "Did he say anything else? Anything at all?" Peter nodded. "One thing. A breath. He said the person he confronted had too much to lose." Silence filled the cottage again. A thick silence. One that carried weight. Money, fear, threats. Agatha clasped her hands. "This is worse than we thought." Miss Marple's gaze remained steady. Financial motives rarely stay hidden for long, especially in small villages. Peter stood. "I know, and I'm afraid this won't end quietly." Miss Marple rose too. Calm, measured, thoughtful. Her eyes moved once more to the window, the hedge, the lane, the unseen listener from before. "Peter," she said softly, "one last question. Does anyone else know about your conversation with the victim?" Peter froze, just for a second, then answered, "Yes." Miss Marple waited. He continued in a whisper. "He told the wrong person." And Miss Marple knew the danger had already spread. The afternoon settled into a slow quiet. Not peaceful, just slow, a waiting kind of quiet. Agatha moved about the kitchen without speaking. Miss Marple knitted softly in her chair. Both women held the same unspoken thought. There were too many clues, and none of them harmless. Another knock came. Short taps. Not nervous. Not bold. Something in between. Agatha opened the door. Joel Cray stood outside. Martha Cray's nephew, a steady young man, usually calm. Today, not quite. "Miss Marple," he said at once, "I need to tell you something from last night." Miss Marple looked up. Her needles paused. "Come in, Joel." He stepped inside, removed his cap, held it awkwardly. Almost like he wasn't sure he should be there. Agatha poured him tea. He didn't touch it, just stared at it for a moment. Then he spoke. "I didn't say anything earlier," Joel began. "I wasn't sure it mattered." Miss Marple smiled softly. "Most things matter, Mr. Cray. Start from the beginning." Joel nodded. "Last night, just before dusk. He was walking home from the stables, a simple evening, nothing unusual, until he reached the path near Blackthorn Meadow. I saw light," he said. "A lantern, not strong, just a little glow, moving." Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. "Inside the meadow." "Yes," Joel swallowed. "I stopped behind the hedge. Didn't want to walk into anyone's argument." Agatha frowned. "Argument?" Joel nodded again. "There were two men, two shadows. I couldn't see faces, but I heard them." Miss Marple's tone stayed even. "Both men local." "One was," Joel said. "I know the voices around here, but the other—" He hesitated. "That other voice was not from Hollowfern." Miss Marple tapped her fingers together gently. "One voice rough," she said quietly. "One polished." Joel's eyes widened. "Yes, exactly that." The rough voice sounded angry, fed up. The polished voice kept calm, too calm. Agatha shivered. Villages rarely held polished voices without purpose. Joel looked down at his hands. "I don't know what they argued about. Couldn't hear the words clearly, but it got worse, louder." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "And then," Joel continued, "one of them grabbed something. A cloth, I think. There was a tearing sound. Sharp, clear, like fabric caught on a fence." Agatha covered her mouth. "That handkerchief." Miss Marple kept her eyes on Joel. "Where did the sound come from? Which part of the fence?" Joel pointed toward the back of the cottage. "Near the far gate, the same place Eli found the man this morning." Miss Marple inhaled quietly. Not surprise, confirmation. The pattern was forming, piece by logical piece. Joel lowered his voice. "I didn't stay long. I stepped back, didn't want them to hear me." "And they didn't?" Miss Marple asked. "No, they were too busy arguing." Miss Marple folded her hands in her lap. Two men, two voices, a torn cloth, a lantern, a hidden meeting, and a death the next morning. The threads were tightening now. Joel stood. "I thought you should know. I don't want trouble. But I don't want lies either." Miss Marple thanked him. He nodded and left quietly, closing the door without a sound. Agatha turned to Miss Marple, her voice barely above a whisper. "This means two people were involved, doesn't it?" Miss Marple did not answer. Not yet. She looked toward the window again, toward Blackthorn Meadow, toward the far gate, because she had just realized something important. Someone had planned that meeting, and someone else had planned what followed next. Constable Merrin arrived at the cottage just after noon. Firm knock, short greeting. He carried the notebook in his hand, still puzzled by it. Dr. Leonard Brisk joined them outside, bag in hand, face thoughtful, not surprised by the day's events, only tired of them. Miss Marple stepped out with her shawl, calm as always. Agatha watched from the door, worried, silent. "We'll start at the shed," Merrin said. "The old fern drying shed. Eli mentioned the gate near it looked disturbed." Miss Marple nodded, not because she agreed, but because she already knew they needed to see it. The pattern pointed there, quietly, firmly. They walked the path behind the meadow, stray twigs, stiff grass. The shed appeared at the far edge. Old wood, sagging corners, a place often forgotten. Merrin pushed the door open. It creaked, but not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to show disuse. Miss Marple stepped inside first. Her eyes needed only a moment. Then everything settled into place, each detail exactly where it shouldn't be. Dr. Brisk lit a small lantern, just enough light to see the floor, and that was all Miss Marple needed. The soil near the left wall was disturbed, not lightly, not by accident. A clear shift, a shallow dig mark, the shape of a quick search. or a quick burial. Merrin knelt. "What do you make of this?" Miss Marple answered softly. "Someone hid something here, or removed something." Dr. Brisk moved to the far corner. He pointed with his shoe. "Boot prints," he said. "Two patterns, different sizes." Miss Marple stepped closer. One print wider, one narrower, one heavier, one lighter. Two men, not one. Her mind confirmed what Joel had hinted. Merrin found something near an old crate. He held it up carefully. A torn piece of coat lining. Dark fabric, not weathered. Fresh tear. Edges sharp. Miss Marple recognized the quality. Too fine for farm workers. She folded her hands slowly. Another piece of the puzzle. Dr. Brisk knelt near the hearthstones. "Burnt paper," he said. "Someone tried to destroy something here." Miss Marple looked closer. Small black flakes. Edges curled. One piece still faintly marked with ink. Not enough to read, but enough to prove it had mattered. Merrin followed her gaze. "So, they tore pages from the notebook and burned the rest?" "Possibly," Miss Marple murmured. "Or they burned notes of their own. Either way, they wanted something erased." Merrin moved to the back wall. "Take a look at this." A rope coil lay on the floor, used recently. Fibers stretched, not dusty, not old. No reason for it to be here. Miss Marple touched it gently. "Fresh use," she said quietly. "Someone tied something, or someone." Dr. Brisk looked uneasy. "This is no simple quarrel." Miss Marple said nothing. She walked the room once more, her eyes on the soil, the prints, the burnt paper, the rope. Everything added weight to the truth forming in her mind. A truth she was not ready to speak yet, not until the last thread aligned. Merrin stepped outside. "Miss Marple, should we search the back field next?" Miss Marple didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the disturbed soil. She lowered herself slightly, touched the ground with 2 fingers. It was warm. Too warm. Someone had been here, very recently. She straightened slowly, her voice steady. "Constable, we are not alone out here." And someone, just beyond the shed, had gone very still. The day grew colder as they returned from the shed. Agatha waited on the porch, her face tight, her hands clasped. Worried eyes moved from Miss Marple to Merrin. She knew the search had not brought comfort. They stepped inside. Tea was poured again. Quiet routine, small comfort, necessary comfort. But the quiet did not last. A knock came, short, measured, almost polite. Agatha opened the door slowly. A man stood there, tall, neat, tidy hair, sharp coat. A stranger, yet not nervous. "Good afternoon," he said warmly. Calm voice. Too calm. Agatha blinked. "Yes. Can we help you?" The man smiled, a practiced smile, smooth, untroubled. "I'm Julian Reddick. I've just taken a room at the inn." Miss Marple looked up at him from her chair, her gaze quiet, curious. "It's unusual," she said softly, "to see newcomers this time of year." He turned to her politely. "Yes, I suppose so. But business brings me here." Merrin stepped forward. "What sort of business?" Reddick's smile didn't move. "Land, mostly. Ownership records, boundaries, old agreements. I'm doing some private research." Miss Marple watched him over the rim of her teacup. Land research. Old agreements. At the same time, a man is found dead, near a disputed meadow. Interesting timing. Too interesting. Reddick continued. "I understand Hollow Fern has several old farm plots, some unused, some improperly marked." Merrin's expression hardened. "You've been asking villagers questions?" "A few," Reddick said lightly. "Nothing intrusive." Agatha frowned. "When did you arrive?" "Last night," Reddick replied. "Quite late." Miss Marple set her cup down. "Last night?" she repeated gently. "Just after dusk?" Reddick hesitated. Only briefly, but she saw it. "Well, yes, around that time." A small pause in the wrong place. A small hesitation. But enough for Miss Marple. Enough to tell her he was hiding something. Merrin crossed his arms. "And you've been walking the village?" "Only to get a sense of the land," Reddick said. "Old boundaries interest me." Miss Marple's voice stayed soft. "You were near the old barn this morning." Reddick blinked. "I walked past it, yes. Why?" Miss Marple smiled lightly. "No reason, just noticing things." He didn't like that answer. She could tell. His jaw tightened a fraction, barely visible. Agatha stepped back. "Did you want something in particular, Mr. Reddick?" He clasped his hands behind his back. "No, just wishing to introduce myself. I like to know the communities I work in." Miss Marple nodded. A very sensible habit. But inside her mind, the pieces shifted. Reddick's arrival, his questions, his late-night timing, his interest in land. A dead man found on disputed soil, someone tearing pages from a notebook, someone burning information. Reddick seemed calm, too calm, perfectly calm, and that was its own kind of clue. He tipped his hat lightly, then stepped away, walking down the lane, measured steps, unhurried, unbothered. Agatha closed the door slowly, her voice barely above a murmur. "Miss Marple, what do you think of him?" Miss Marple lifted her knitting, soft click of needles, a calm rhythm. Her eyes remained on the door. "I think," she said quietly, "he is pretending not to watch us." Agatha swallowed. "Pretending?" Miss Marple nodded. "Yes. And the question now is very simple." She paused. Her voice gentled. "What is he waiting for? Out there in the lane." The afternoon drifted into a slow hush. Agatha tidied the sitting room. Miss Marple watched the lane from her chair. Reddick had disappeared, but she doubted he had gone far. Another knock came. Soft, uneven, almost timid. Agatha opened the door. Martha Cray stood there, the old villager, face pale, hands shaking slightly, not with cold, but with something heavier. "Come in, Martha," Miss Marple said gently. The old woman stepped forward, her breath unsteady, her eyes darting from Agatha to Miss Marple, then back to the floor. "I shouldn't have waited," Martha whispered. "I should have told you earlier, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't want trouble." "Trouble rarely waits for permission," Miss Marple said softly. "Sit, my dear." Martha lowered herself onto a chair. Her hands gripped the armrest, knuckles pale. She had seen something she had carried alone for too long. Miss Marple folded her hands. "Tell me what you saw." Martha swallowed. Her voice trembled. "It was early this morning, before anyone else was awake. I was walking the path behind my garden, toward the fern shed." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. The shed again. Always the shed. Martha continued. "I saw someone, a man, walking toward the shed." Miss Marple leaned in. "Did you recognize him?" Martha nodded, slow, reluctant, as if speaking his name would bring danger to the room. "He was carrying a satchel," Martha said. "A heavy one, pulled at his shoulder. He kept looking around, like he didn't want anyone to see him." Agatha's breath caught. "Did he see you?" "No," Martha said quickly. "I stayed behind the hedge. He never turned." Miss Marple waited. One more detail was coming. She could feel it. The old woman's voice shook harder as she spoke again. "His boots," Martha whispered. "They were covered in red soil." Agatha's eyes widened. Miss Marple remained still, her mind turning. Red soil. The same soil from the notebook. The same soil not found anywhere in Blackthorn Meadow. "Martha," Miss Marple said quietly, "no one in Hollow Fern has red soil on their land. Not a single field." "I know," Martha whispered. "That's why I got scared." Miss Marple nodded slowly. "Who was he?" Silence. Martha looked down. Her fingers trembled against her skirt. She struggled to speak the name. Fear held her voice back. "Martha," Miss Marple said gently, "you can tell me." The old woman closed her eyes, then whispered, "Clive Rowan, the council treasurer." Agatha gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Peter Lantern's words returned instantly. The accounts, the warnings, the fear, the victim confronting someone with too much to lose. Miss Marple sat upright, calm, steady, the pattern almost complete now, threads tightening, truth drawing closer. Martha's voice fell to a whisper. "He wasn't going for work, Miss Marple. Not at that hour, and not with that satchel." Miss Marple closed her knitting. Her eyes moved to the window, to the lane, to the world outside the cottage. Because one fact was now certain. Clive Rowan had been at the shed, before the body was found, carrying something, carrying red soil. Miss Marple spoke quietly, almost to herself. "So the treasurer had business in the meadow." Agatha stared at her. "What does that mean?" Miss Marple did not answer. Not yet. Her eyes stayed fixed on the path outside, as if waiting for someone, or something, because the next piece of truth was walking toward them even now. The cottage grew still after Martha left, very still. Agatha closed the door gently. Her eyes stayed wide, her breathing uneven. Miss Marple sat in her usual chair, hands folded, needlework untouched, mind alert, quiet, deep in thought. Agatha hovered near the table, unsure whether to speak, unsure whether silence was safer. Miss Marple spared her the worry. "Sit down, dear," she said softly. Agatha obeyed. Slow steps, slow breath. Miss Marple looked at the teapot. Not for tea, just for something steady to rest her gaze on. A simple anchor for careful thinking. "Let us review," she said calmly. Agatha nodded. Her hands trembled in her lap. Miss Marple spoke one thread at a time, short sentences, clean lines, no embellishment, just order, just truth. First, the object. The striped handkerchief, found on a thorn, not from anyone local. Seen before the death, a quiet clue, a planted clue. Second, the soil. Miss Marple raised one finger. The victim had red soil on the notebook. Another finger. Martha saw red soil on Clive Rowan's boots. Another finger. No red soil exists in Hollow Fern. Agatha swallowed. So someone brought it in. Exactly, Miss Marple said softly. She continued. The missing notebook pages. Ripped, torn, burned, destroyed in the shed. On the same morning the body was found. Agatha whispered. And Clive was there before sunrise. Miss Marple nodded, carrying a satchel and looking around. She folded her hands again. Another thread aligned. The council accounts, she said next. Peter Lantern confirmed discrepancies, large ones, long-running, hidden. Agatha's eyes dropped. Clive Rowan handled all the council money. Yes, Miss Marple replied. Every penny. Another thread, each one tighter than the last. The argument in the meadow, Miss Marple continued. 2 men, 2 voices, one rough, one polished. Agatha frowned. Which one was the victim? Miss Marple did not answer directly. She moved gently to the next point. The stranger, she said, Mr. Julian Reddick. Agatha stiffened. You think he's involved? He wants us to think so, Miss Marple said, her voice soft, measured. He arrives late at night. He asks about land. He appears calm, too calm, and yet nothing he does actually connects to the crime. A misdirection, Agatha whispered. A successful one, Miss Marple said. Until now. She set her knitting aside, carefully, as if clearing space in her mind. Family stress, she continued. Clive Rowan cares for an ill sister, bills overdue, responsibilities heavy, temptation stronger. Agatha closed her eyes. It's all connected, isn't it? Miss Marple nodded. Every thread. She leaned back slowly, her gaze drifting toward the window, toward Hollowfern's quiet lane, toward the truth waiting in the shadows. The object, she repeated. The soil. The missing pages. The accounts. The argument. The shed. The red soil. The satchel. The treasurer. Each word placed carefully, each point narrowing the circle. Agatha whispered, "And the stranger?" Miss Marple spoke gently. "He is a mask, a distraction, a convenient shape to hide behind." Agatha shivered. "So who is the real killer?" Miss Marple did not answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the lane. Her voice lowered, barely above a breath. "There is only one explanation." She paused. Her fingers tightened on the armrest, because the next step was no longer deduction. It was confrontation, and someone outside the cottage was already preparing for it. The Hollow Fern Village Hall filled slowly. Chairs scraped, boots shuffled, voices murmured. But no one spoke loudly. Not today, not after the morning's discovery. Constable Merrin stood near the front, uneasy. Dr. Brisk leaned against the wall, quiet, thoughtful. Agatha sat close to Miss Marple, hands tight, eyes fixed ahead. Miss Marple stepped forward, calm, steady. No drama, no flourish, just her usual gentle presence. "Thank you for coming," she began. "I believe it is time to explain what happened in Blackthorn Meadow." The room stilled. Even the draft at the door seemed to pause. Miss Marple continued. "First, the accident was staged. The position of the body was wrong, too neat, too arranged, and the button near the gate was placed there, not dropped." A few villagers exchanged glances. "Second, the notebook pages were removed, not lost, not torn by chance, taken out and burned in the old fern shed." Constable Merrin nodded. Everyone remembered the burnt scraps. "Third, the red soil," Miss Marple said. "It did not come from Hollow Fern. It came from another property entirely. A property visited frequently by the treasurer, for reasons he did not share." A soft gasp moved through the room. Fourth, the striped scarf found on the thorn was planted. It belonged to no one local. It served only one purpose. She paused. "To mislead you." Julian Reddick shifted in his seat. Eyes narrowed. Miss Marple noticed, but continued. "Fifth, the drag marks from the meadow to the shed were clear. Someone moved the body. Not far, but far enough." The villagers leaned forward. All of them, even those who swore they didn't care. "Sixth, 2 men argued the night before," Miss Marple said. "One voice rough, one polished." "That is correct." Joel Cray lowered his eyes. He knew what he'd heard. "But," Miss Marple added softly, "only one man struck the blow." Silence fell. Complete silence. Agatha watched Miss Marple's face, calm, certain, logical. "And seventh," Miss Marple said, "the outsider, the very polite Mr. Reddick, was used as a distraction, a mask, a convenient shape to hide behind." Reddick's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Miss Marple turned to the room, her voice soft, but firm. "The true killer is Clive Rowan, the council treasurer." A loud murmur swept the hall. One woman stood, another gasped. Someone whispered his name twice, as if unable to believe it. Miss Marple continued slowly. "He was hiding missing funds, large amounts, for months. The victim discovered the irregularities. He planned to report them. He confronted the treasurer." Dr. Brisk closed his eyes. He understood now. Miss Marple went on. "Clive Rowan met him in Blackthorn Meadow. They argued. The treasurer struck him. Panic followed. He dragged the body, staged the accident, burned the evidence, used red soil to confuse footprints, and relied on Mr. Reddick's arrival to pull suspicion away. Every detail landed cleanly, logically, quietly." Miss Marple folded her hands. Her work done, and then she added one final line, soft, barely above a breath. "But Clive is not acting alone. The hall erupted. Voices rose. Chairs shifted. Panic spread because Miss Marple's eyes had moved to someone standing near the back. And that person stopped breathing for one single, fatal moment. Hollow Fern grew quiet again. The rush of fear eased. Voices softened. Families returned to their routines. Doors stayed open. Lights felt warmer. The council corrected the accounts. Every number checked. Every mistake uncovered. No more hiding. No more whispers. Constable Merrin walked the lanes with steadier steps. Dr. Brisk returned to his patients. Agatha finally breathed without worry. Eli Turner laughed again. Even Martha Cray slept better. Miss Marple sat by the cottage window, a calm cup of tea, hands resting, mind peaceful. She looked at the village she had helped steady. A place full of ordinary people, ordinary lives, and ordinary troubles that tried to stay hidden. Then she spoke one soft truth. Secrets stretch far, but truth moves quietly behind them, and Hollow Fern understood. Davis returns with a warm smile. "Thank you for joining us tonight," he says gently. "As always, I'd love to know. What clue surprised you first? And where are you listening from tonight?" He nods, pleased, grateful for every listener. "Join us again for another warm night of mystery." Then his voice softens. The familiar promise returns. "Tomorrow, another kettle will boil." Night settles over Hollow Fern. A soft knock touches Miss Marple's door. An envelope waits. No name. No sender. Inside, one torn note. She wasn't the only one watching. Miss Marple looks up, calm, certain. And somewhere, a new secret waits.